Thank God. Good.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another session of our Bible study through the eyes of St. John. Tonight, we are going to tackle, again, 2 chapters, not quite, but pretty close. And I think we'll be able to do it. It's one of those important signs. And you remember how signs are told in John's gospel. So we'll be ready for that tonight as well. Is there someone who would like to pray for us tonight, online or in the room, who could lead us in prayer? Well, I suppose it's been a couple weeks since your pastor's done it, so I best I'm due. Is that how that works? The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for the gift of your Son, Jesus Christ, who came among us, born in our flesh, and took on all of our infirmities and our sin, so that we might be one with you and share eternally with you the gifts that you have given to us. Heavenly Father, this night we ask that by your word you would open our eyes, that we might see you and come to believe and to confess that you indeed are the one true God, and that your Son, Jesus Christ, is the Lord of all creation, and that we might see in him the gate to eternal life. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So we have the book of signs, which we're just now coming down toward the end. And then by the end of next week's class, we'll finish the book of signs and move into what is called the book of glory, which starts in chapter 12. But tonight, the sign is the healing of the man born blind. And it's kind of an interesting thing because there was an understanding in Jewish thought that there were people who could be born with their sight and lose their sight. But it was very uncommon that people would be born blind, or so they believed. There would be an accident that might cause blindness, or there might be some kind of sin that causes illness that would make blindness, but not that people were actually born without their eyesight. We, of course, know that that's not entirely true, but in the mindset of the first century, that was the case. So the sign is actually relatively small, which is always the case in John, these great moments in the story, and they're like, 7 verses. And then what follows is the meat and potatoes. And so we'll get into the dialogues tonight, and we'll actually use the dialogues as a way of answering the questions, those 2 book report questions that I gave to you. What's the dilemma and how is it resolved? And we'll watch how that plays back and forth. And then we'll get into the beautiful discourse of chapter 10, which we know as the Good Shepherd chapter. Of course, good here is not that he is, just, exceptional or wonderful, but he's the model. He's the perfect and true shepherd for us as we go through. This is an old image. I can't seem to find the kind of subscription for it, but it seems to be Eastern iconography. And you can see that the paint is starting to wear off the wall from it. But you have Jesus putting mud on the guy's eyes, and then he's washing in the pool of Siloam, which we know was not just a little font, but an actual big pool. These are how these things are displayed. Gail O'Day, who is an excellent John scholar, I think that's what she has her PhD in, is the Gospel of John. She says, readers are invited to see their experience within the drama that is being enacted before their own eyes. Right? And this is a matter of show and tell. So as we read the story of John chapter 9, you're invited to kind of see yourself in this story. Okay? Another beautiful image by Ronald Robb of Jesus giving sight. You notice the one eye is still completely covered, and then the other eye all of a sudden you can see the pupil there, or the iris of the eye. That's emerging there. Okay. Here's the plan. I'm going to read the entire chapter of chapter 9 for you. You're invited to follow along, and you'll answer those 3 questions that we have been using to kind of guide our reflection. What grabs your attention, what captures your imagination, and what questions are arising in your reading. Okay, so I invite you to turn to chapter 9 and keep these questions before you, and then we'll tackle the chapter kind of in bits and pieces. Make sense? So we begin. As he passed by, Jesus saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spat on the ground and made mud with saliva. And then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is he." Others said, "No, but he is like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." So they said to him, "Then how were your eyes open?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." And they said to him, "Well, where is he?" He said, "I don't know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day, and when Jesus had made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son, and we know that he was born blind. But how he now sees, we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know this man is a sinner." He answered, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you not want to hear it again? Do you want also to become his disciples?" But they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses. But as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and would you teach us?" and they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who may see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are you also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains." The gospel of the Lord. It's really helpful to hear the whole thing together in one story. So you kind of get all of the pieces that are moving there together. What grabs your attention? What captures your imagination? And what questions arise from your teaching? I'm going to take some notes, okay?
I think it's verse 16 that the Pharisees are more concerned than business on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
That God can see.
Yep.
Because people even
Yeah.
are not impressed with it.
Which, so Jean Burrell says it's crazy that they are so upset about the Sabbath violation that he can now see. By the way, that's probably the reason that there's a reference to the mud, because the spit and the dirt kneaded together into mud would have been the violation. That's what that's all about. You can't knead something on the Sabbath. You got to make your bread the day before. You better make the mud the day before too, okay? It's also in a Greco-Roman context, spit had magical powers. When other gods or demigods would spit, it had magic power. And so you have that sort of sneaking into this Judeo-Christian story as well.
Do you think the Pharisees are the same Pharisees that discourse?
It's a great question, Claire. Claire just asked if it's the same group of Pharisees every time. We know that the Pharisees who are, there's sort of two groups that we're dealing with when we're in Jerusalem, and this is happening in Jerusalem. So there's a group of Pharisees, which is a whole community of rabbinical teachers, and then there's the Sanhedrin. And you could be a Pharisee, and you could also be a part of the Sanhedrin, but not all members of the Sanhedrin were Pharisees. And they are the group of 70 who are part of the official Jewish council, which are going to have a more prominent role in the death of Jesus. We don't know that it's the same group every time that Jesus is having a run-in. The Sanhedrin would certainly be part of the Jews, which is that kind of term that's been used, and we hear it again tonight. Those who are considered to be the enemies of Jesus. Yes.
Yeah, because it seems the division always seems to be the same, like you were saying.
Yeah.
It's done on the Sabbath, and it's a sign.
Yep. Yeah, it's done on the Sabbath. It's a sign, and the Pharisees are upset about it.
Right.
Yeah. And it's important, I think, this was kind of a discovery that I made too today. Remember that there's a whole conflict going on within the Jewish community, because who's going to have the power when Rome is sitting, has us under their thumb? So you have the Pharisees trying to fight for authority and power among the community. You have the Sadducees, another group of aristocracy, but they don't believe in the resurrection. Okay. You have zealots, who are sort of the Jewish nationalists, that you hear kind of in our own time about Christian nationalism. There was some of that going on too. And then the Essenes, which was a small separatist community who had moved out by the Salt Lake. They kind of set up their own community and were trying to be super devout and highly regulated in this kind of separatist community that had moved away from Jerusalem and tried to, stay away from Rome as much as possible. So you have all this conflict going on. And then you also have the priests and the Levites who are trying to keep that authority and power for the temple, right? Just religiously, theologically. So these tensions are real. And then add in Jesus coming, teaching a whole new theology, a whole new understanding of who God is and how we relate to him. And boy, you're off and running. Okay. Any other thing that grabs your attention in the story or captures your imagination or raises a question?
Well,
Pam.
that's kind of silly because he kept on telling them that this is what happened and they would not believe.
Yeah.
And it was just, well, I told you, don't believe, but they wouldn't.
Yeah, there's almost humor in this story. If you read it correctly, you can't help but laugh, right? I am the guy, I promise, I was him, and then they move into the next scene and they still don't believe him. And then they come back again. Well, are you sure you're really the dude? Hey, I told you this, and then the best line is verse 30, right? They say, we know that God has spoken through Moses, but for this man, we don't know where he comes from. And he goes, well, this is really an amazing thing. You don't know where he comes from, but yet he opened my eyes, and only one person can do that, right? If God is really in charge of creation, then God is the one who does that, and this man has to be from God. Deb.
Well, except like in verse 4, and that's Jesus speaking,
Right.
that we must quickly carry out the task assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. So he would actually, according to this, he actually did the healing more or less before the Sabbath hit, because isn't that usually in the eve? That's considered evening, or
Sabbath starts at night, but it runs the whole day. So it's they, instead of seeing, our day starts at like 6 a.m. and runs through, they would say that it starts at sundown and runs to the next sundown. So it is still that he's working during the day. This could also be sort of a proverbial statement by Jesus, right? About light and darkness, right? So while I'm here as the light of the world, you can do the works of God. But once I'm gone, and this is for sure a reference to chapter 13, when Judas is going to leave from the midst of from the party, right? From the meal that's hosted. And it says, and Judas departed, and it was night. And you get that kind of reference that now the work of the evil one is going to be at work there. Great question. Timing is important, and it helps us make sense of that. Yep. Jean Burrell, you were going to say something?
The end of verse 27, I asked him that I told you already, you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciple?
Yeah.
I bet that really burns him.
Yeah, that's the biggest zinger of all, isn't it? Yeah, verse 27. Do you want to become his disciples? Oh, how dare you? You can just hear that, right? In the commentary. Yep. Anything else? It's interesting that we get this translation about the pool of Siloam, that it means sent, right? Because the man born blind is going to be sent to the pool. And who is Jesus? The one who was sent from the Father. Yeah, it's just crazy. You just can't help but get excited about it, right? And so now he is sent and then comes back. Yep. Pam, yeah.
My Bible says the pool of Siloam was discovered by accident in 2004 as workers in Jerusalem dug to repair a sewer pipe that was located only a few feet from the buried ruins. And then it continues on. It said they found ancient pottery, and it says it's just what the Bible said.
Yep. 2004, you said?
2004.
Yeah, so the Pool of Siloam has been there. It was right next to the temple, in the temple ruins, and we discovered it. We found it in 2004. So it's a real place where the magic happened. Yep. Great.
It's interesting that, again, we've got another story where people are trying to pin the ailment on sin.
Yeah.
So it's something that he did or
The
the parents did,
Yep.
the generations.
Yep.
And I know there's scripture with that in the Old Testament, but, you know, both times, like here again, now we put it back to that it's, that God, you know, is going to do something here.
Right, right.
To God, you know, and then you back to God's glory and everything. And yeah, we still have that dilemma today. We talked
Yep.
about a couple weeks ago about that.
Yep.
You know, and stuff, and how there are Christians even who think that you should be healed or shouldn't have an ailment or shouldn't have a lifelong condition.
Right. Yeah. This idea of sin being connected to illness, right? And this idea that if I'm a sinner, then I have that illness is a moral category, is one way of understanding it. Yeah.
Does not agree with that.
Yeah. It's something about the relationship, right? And about being able to show God's glory, particularly. Yeah, we'll see that too. When we get to chapter 11, man, the whole thing's going to be blown open, right? Because it's not just being sick, but being actually dead. Yeah. Gloria and then Deb.
Well, you can kind of see here that the elders or whoever they were picking on the parents long before this time.
Yeah.
Because apparently this sin of blindness, apparently, they probably had to pay a few extra denarii or whatever it was to the temple because they had this son that was blind because you could see how angry they are.
Yeah. This is a problem for the parents, their relationship with the religious establishment.
It's like, they're almost ready to slap them.
Yeah. And they also don't want to take responsibility for their son for fear that they too will be removed. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, there's been a whole lot of stuff going on, you know, because they keep asking who this boy is. And these are small towns, they know it.
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
I mean, you know every single person and whatever they do, and so there's a whole lot of crap.
Yep. That's right. Deb.
Well, in my study notes, it talks about that it says we see 4 different reactions to Jesus. The neighbors revealed surprise and skepticism. The Pharisees showed disbelief and prejudice. The parents believed but kept quiet for fear of excommunication.
Right.
And the healed man showed consistent growing faith. And then it goes on, these responses are not unlike the responses of people who encounter Jesus today. Only the blind man responded to Jesus with an open, confident faith.
Yeah. You see that as a progression too in the story, right? First, he says, the man Jesus, and then he calls him a prophet, and then he calls him, what's the other one? Eventually he gets there, right? Sir, and then Lord, right?
Lord,
I
yep.
believe. Yep, it's great. Anything else thus far? Yeah, there's a connection to John 3:16. Yep. For God so loved the world, right, that he gave his one and only son. Yeah. Yeah, that judgment. Yep. 18 to 21. Yep. Absolutely. Good. Let's do some of these book report questions. Okay. Who are all the players in the story? So we have the man born blind, Jesus. Okay, now I've answered all those. I took the easy ones. Okay, you keep going. Pharisees, the Jews of some sort. Yep, the ones who are kind of slowly become the enemies of Jesus. Yep. The neighbors, the parents. Yep. So there's a lot of moving parts here, right? Jean and I had a long conversation today. How are we going to find enough people to do all of these readings, in church on Sunday? So we're getting that all lined around. And what is the setting? The time is during the day, Sabbath, right? And we're in Jerusalem. Okay. And what's the mood, do you think? Depends on who you ask, right? It is all over the place. It really is. There's sort of division all the way around. Okay. Well, the other book report questions that I've been having you ask often are, what's the dilemma and how is it resolved? Okay. And so I just want to take a little time to kind of dissect these 5 scenes a little bit and talk about what's really at stake in the argument, and then how is it resolved? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I think we'll see it a little bit more fully when we get into John chapter 10. Remember that 9 and 10 are read together. So chapter 9 is the healing, the sign, and the dialogue. And then chapter 10 is going to be the discourse that Jesus offers to kind of break it open more fully. Okay. So look at verses 13 to 17. That's where we're going to begin. The man has been healed now. Okay. And he's come back, and there's a confrontation between the blind man and the Pharisees, verses 13 to 17. What's the dilemma in that scene? Verse 14, it tells us
It was the Sabbath.
Sabbath day. There's the dilemma. Okay. And how is it resolved? It isn't really resolved, is it? Except that we have to kind of use some other interpretation. This is not the first time Jesus has done this, right? Remember the pool of Siloam, the invalid in chapter 5, right? Jesus is not so worried about the law or the regulation of Sabbath if someone's life, the fullness or the restoration of life, is at stake. And there were exceptions for this in the Levitical law, but so often they're ignored. They are sort of left behind for the sake of being, super religious or super devout. Okay. Is there any resolution, do you think, in that?
So on the Sabbath,
Yeah, on the Sabbath resolution.
I'm trying to remember on the, in my mind here too. So, or chapter 10.
Yeah.
So in there somewhere, it does have to say something with the Sabbath that, it had to get to the identity, for the authority.
Yeah, the authority of who is the Lord of the Sabbath, so to speak.
So
Yep.
The Pharisees aren't coming to any conclusion, but then Jesus just continues.
Right. He lays it out and shows that he's the Lord of creation. Yep. Yeah, good. There, it may not be a resolution for the Pharisees, so to speak, the dilemma there, but there is a resolution for the blind man, right? You start to see there's a little sparkle of faith, right? When he says, this isn't just the man, Jesus, this is a prophet, right? And remember, that was a term that's used in Deuteronomy by Moses to talk about one who is coming, who is even greater than me, right? And so you get a sense that maybe this blind man, this confrontation isn't so much for the Pharisees as it is for the blind man, to move him to kind of that next stage of faith, right?
I read somewhere that also, but it's true that people look at the prophet also, or in that time, to be someone with extraordinary power, or someone sent from God?
Yeah, someone sent from God. Yeah, this prophet, the Samaritans in the north actually believed in the prophet. They didn't have this idea of a messianic king because they didn't read the prophetic texts or the history texts. They only had the first 5 books of the Bible. And so this idea comes from Deuteronomy 18, and that this prophet who is going to do even greater signs than Moses. So that's where that idea of great power comes from.
Which then the skilled man now is listening to the argument.
Yep.
Going,
Can't you see? Can't you see it? Yeah, that's right. Yep. Anything else there? The dilemma and the resolution? Gloria.
The dilemma is kind of like the blind man is not really the blind people.
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. Gloria just said, the dilemma is not that the blind man is the blind people. There's somebody else who is blind in this story, right? And it's the Pharisees, and they're about ready to get their socks kind of kicked off.
You know, the way they're describing the law, it's, they're doing it like, you know, if you break a fingernail.
Yep.
you're in trouble.
Yep. They're making the ends meet the need right now.
I
Yep.
mean, they're way on the.
They're missing the boat, aren't they? Yeah. Yep.
Because if you read through around it, it's not that difficult.
Right. Yeah, remember, there are 613 laws in the Torah, right? But then there's all the interpretations. And the Pharisees were the ones who were the gatekeepers on how that should be interpreted and so on and so forth. Yeah, so they're pretty blind here, and they need kind of a spiritual awakening or a.
Blind man tells them, here it is.
Yeah. Here's the proof. What more do you need? I am him. And they just don't get it. You're right. Deb.
Again, in the study notes, it says, while the Pharisees conducted investigations and debated about Jesus, people were being healed and lives were being changed. The Pharisees' skepticism was not based on insufficient evidence, but on jealous hatred of Jesus's popularity and influence on the people.
Yeah. Yep. And this is just going to keep coming like this. It's like a pot, right? You know, and you've seen the lid of your boiling pot, right? It's just dancing. And all of a sudden the heat's going to get cranked up and the thing's going to blow up here. And unfortunately, it's going to be the blind man who's going to face the brunt of that, right? In verse 34. But now we're getting ahead of ourselves because we have another dilemma here, the Jews and the parents. And it may be that the Pharisees were a part of this Jews, right, that Claire pointed out early on. It may be another group that's been drawn into the commotion that's been caused by this healing. We don't really know, but there's another conflict here, another dilemma. So at verse 18 to 23, what's the dilemma there?
now you're questioning whether the man was blind. So
Yeah.
now the parents can provide proof.
Yeah, it's almost a question of integrity, right? Like, well, is this really his story or not? Right? Yeah, that's a great point there. Anything else that you see as a conflict in this portion?
They're still busy at this. There's something wrong with you because it's for
There's something wrong with you because your son. Yep, that's right. Yep, sin as the cause, right? Which is biblical, by the way. There's justification for that, right? Exodus chapter 20 says, I will visit the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. So you have that kind of in the sense. But of course, then you have the Old Testament responding with books like Job and Ecclesiastes that say, Job was righteous and blameless, and yet all these bad things happen to him, and he never loses his faith. He comes really darn close, right? But there's that. And then you have the book of Ecclesiastes, right? I've examined everything under the sun, and I can't seem to make sense of it. So whether it's sin or whether there's forgiveness, whether things don't go well or things are going okay, just eat, drink, and be merry. This is the Lord's gift. God's gift to man, right? So you have this kind of conflict about what do you make of sin, and where does it come from, or how does it get started, and what are the consequences of sin? And certainly in kind of Jewish thought, there was this idea that sin caused physical consequences. That may be true. Talk to anybody who's been an alcoholic, right? They'll tell you, yeah, I drank too much and I was puking, for days on end. There are consequences to some of our actions, but whether they're kind of these physical ailments, it remains yet to be seen. And of course, in this case, Jesus says, well, this guy, God manipulated the history so that I could show you God's glory. And let me give you his sight back. There's another conflict or a dilemma here. Take a look at verse 22. There is an inter-Jewish conflict. And this may not be so much a part of what is happening in Jesus' day, but may be happening in John's day and John's community. That those who had come to confess and believe in Jesus were being kicked out of the synagogue as being troublemakers in the Jewish community. And this seems to be, because it's in parentheses, although there aren't really parentheses in Greek writing, but there seems to be this seems to be sort of an extra narrative commentary that's offered. And it could be that John and his own people, his own community, which could be this blind man, who was kicked out of their synagogue because they had come to believe and to confess in Jesus. Okay. Is there a resolution to that? Not until we get to verse 35. Okay. It's going to be resolved, that being kicked out of your community, but it's going to have to wait just a little bit more. The parents are nervous about that, right? Yep. He's of age, let him bear testimony about himself. Yep. And that really gets at the nature of first century communities, right? We've sort of gotten away from this, particularly because we live in Maple Lake, right? There isn't a grocery store here, right? So we have to go to Buffalo. We don't have the government center, the county government center. We have to go to Buffalo for that. But back in the day, especially in the first century, everything was dependent on your community, right? You needed everybody in that community, and you all went to the same synagogue. Well, you get cast out of the synagogue, right? Well, then maybe I'm not willing to do business with you. I'm not willing to help watch your kids. I'm not willing to do this, that, or the other thing because you can't be trusted according to the leaders of the synagogue. This is just going to be detrimental to the communal life of the people of God in the first century. And that's what you really see that John and his community are really struggling with here. And so they have to kind of come up with they have to build a new community that's going to be centered around what? Their identity in Jesus. And hopefully they'll have enough resources to be able to support their own community.
The Pharisees, I think, are really prideful, and Jesus is really coming down on them hard, and they were like the king or whatever in that community.
Right. They had the most authority there. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Pam. Yep, the Pharisees had so much authority that they could kind of maneuver things in their favor. I bring this up every once in a while, but you know the story, The Fiddler on the Roof, right? This Eastern European story in this community. The main character, Tevye, is Jewish, right? Ultra-Orthodox or at least conservative Jewish. And there's also a Russian or Eastern Orthodox community of Christians there, right? And you see how they're, even in this challenge to their whole community, the lines are sort of drawn, right? Between the Christians are going to take care of themselves and the Jews are going to take care of themselves. You kind of see that same thing happening here. And you say the parents saying to their own kid, this is your problem. We're not going to get into it. That's another kind of illustration that you might use or think about as you read this story.
And to the parents, I mean, once your kid is of age, I mean, the question wasn't, is it sick?
Yeah.
The question was, is this your son who you say was born blind? Well, they've answered that.
Yep.
But now how he was healed and all the stuff from there.
Right. He's of age. Ask him.
Yeah,
Yep.
They weren't there. They,
Yeah.
Either.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would say the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Claire says she's passing the buck too if she's not there. Yeah. He is responsible for what has happened, right? The parents weren't there. They can't testify about something they haven't seen. Right. Legally, for the sake of the community, for the sake of their religious life, you're exactly right. They're not, we maybe are too harsh on them and, and cause them or say they're passing the buck. But there is sort of a reality here. He can speak for himself.
I think we give them that because they're afraid.
Right.
But,
Right.
They do go right on into questioning, the healed man now again. Right
Yep.
after that. And now that's when they bring up sin. That's what I was trying to find that verse before, where the Pharisees give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner.
Yep.
And I love how he tells them, well, whether he's a sinner, I do not know.
Yep.
Whether
Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's the dilemma in the next section. So we've talked about the parents and whether or not that's resolved, I'm not sure. But the next section beginning in verse 24 is the blind man versus the Pharisees or the Jews. We're not even really sure, right? They're only called they in this portion. Yeah, it's funny, right? They say, give glory to God. By the way, this is an oath. They are asking him to make an oath before God. Yeah, an oath, O-A-T-H, right? So now he's on trial. Okay, he's on trial. And what he says is, I don't know if Jesus is a sinner. I can't testify to that, but I know that I was blind and now I see. And if you're wondering, yes, we are singing Amazing Grace on Sunday. Okay, so I've just just put that to rest, right? I was blind, but now I see, right? It's going to be there, I promise, okay? Mary Guy would say, throwing you a bone, right? One of those common songs that we knew, okay? What's the dilemma then, do you think, in 24 to 34? Do you see the switch that happens here?
More focused on sin. I mean, that's, but
Yeah, there's an emphasis on sin and what that means or what the implications of sin are. Yep. What else do you think?
well, they continue the question again. Obviously, he's telling them, I've already told you, you're not listening. I
Yep.
love that he's,
Yeah. Yeah, he becomes the teacher. So that really is the dilemma. All of a sudden, the tables are turned. And now they are not the ones who are in authority, but it's this man who has had this experience with Jesus. and he doesn't know all the answers, and he can't explain how it's all possible. But verse 33, what? If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. But I know that this happened to me, right? He has had an encounter, an experience with the Lord, and he can't help but make sure that they know what's going on here. And they are now being judged based on whose criteria? The power of God at work in his own life, right? You can't negate what God has done in somebody's life, right? You don't get to regulate that. That's what the Jews and the Pharisees are trying to do. They're trying to make it fit in the law. But what does the gospel do? It breaks everything open, right? And that's really the resolution. It's just so strange because it's so contrary to how we think things should work, right? But what happens here is all of a sudden the tables switch. And now it's not the Pharisees sitting in the judgment seat, but it's this blind man who now has the authority of Jesus, the healer, to say, listen, I don't know what your deal is, but I was blind and now I see. I was one way and now I'm another. And the only thing in between is him, right? By the way, that's a famous quote from The Chosen, episode 1. Okay, so I've been plugging that. If you haven't seen it yet, get the app and you can log and check it out. It really is worth it. And it brings the biblical story to life in just a really profound and beautiful way.
So is this all happening in the synagogue or is it outside?
We don't really know, Pam. That's a great question. Is it happening in synagogue? Is it happening outside? We know that it's in Jerusalem. We know that it's very possible that that this argument is happening in synagogue and that the rabbi of that local synagogue is a member of the Pharisees, right? And he's called together another, person to kind of argue this out. We just don't really know.
So where did they throw them out to then?
Well, yeah, this casting out in verse 34 is not just simply being kicked out of the building, right? Like I have the authority. If somebody's going to come into church and make a scene, I have the authority to kick them out, right? But this is more than that. It's an excommunication. You are no longer a part of this community. We cut you off because he doesn't fit their narrative. Right? He's not towing the line. He's not keeping the status quo, so to speak. The verb in verse 34 is ekbalo, kicked out, cast out, literally cut off from the community. Which sets up the dilemma then for verse 35 to 38. He no longer has any community, right? The Pharisees have cut him off from the community. If his parents are still part of the religious establishment, now he's cut off from his family. That's the dilemma for verse 35 to 38. And then what happens? Verse 35, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him. Having found him. When Christianity has a place of prominence, we don't usually have these challenges, right? But when faith puts us in conflict with the larger community, and we have to pay the price for confessing the faith of Jesus Christ, we now understand the dilemma of this blind man. And having done that, some of us in church politics or maybe in a group of friends, right, where you were one way and now you're another way, you find that you have no other place to go but into the arms of the one who seeks you out, right? And that's what happens in verse 35. It's the greatest resolution in the whole story. Having been cast out, Jesus went and found him. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Well, who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? I want to believe in him. I need something to believe in, period. And Jesus says, I am speaking to you. And he confesses, Lord, I believe. And boom, now he's in relationship, right? That's what it means to move from sin to faith in this gospel, right? It's to be in relationship with Jesus. It's not a moral category. It's not about being suffering the consequences by becoming blind. No, it is to watch God's glory draw you into a relationship with Jesus. And that's the greatest resolution here.
I love how he said, you have seen him.
You have seen him. Yeah.
Healed them so that he could see, and now he's able to use that.
Yeah.
To bring another point.
There's
in
a
this man
yeah,
connection of
right.
the healing and
Right. So it's not just physical sight that he receives, but it's the spiritual sight, right? I was blind, but now I see. Yep, absolutely, Claire. And then in verse 38 to 41, of course, Jesus just goes after them and says, oh, and by the way, you say that you see, but you don't. And so your sin remains. Gail O'Day has this to say about that little piece. She says, in the blind man's journey from physical blindness to spiritual sight, the reader is able to watch as someone comes to the light and is given new life. In the Jewish authorities' journey from physical sight to spiritual blindness, the reader is able to watch as they close themselves to the light and place themselves under judgment, right? Jesus isn't judging them. They just said, nope, we're not going to be in relationship. So the authorities who position themselves as judges of others finally bring themselves under judgment as the true sinners in the story. And Christ is the only true judge of light, right? And that's what he says in chapter 9, verse, what is that? Verse 5. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Any other comments about this scene that we have? Gloria?
Well, if they left the guy that was born blind in the temple, then they'd have to deal with Jesus, and that's another whole kettle of fish.
Yeah, say more about that.
Well, because I mean, he's already saying this man that healed me, he is God, and so, oh no, we're not gonna. You're gonna dump our whole kettle of fish.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because so that they had to throw him out because otherwise they had to deal with Jesus, and there's just no.
Yep, you're exactly right. Gloria points out that they have to cast him out to preserve their authority in the temple and the synagogue. Because if they're saying that Jesus is God, which is what this man is claiming, now they have a problem with what does their temple mean? What does their synagogue mean? What does their authority and their teaching and their law mean if Jesus is standing right here just healing people for the fun of it? Yeah, that's a great point and well taken. Yep.
They have to deal with the whole business.
And nobody wants to do that much work. Yeah, to deal with that conflict. So at the beginning of our time together, I said from Gail O'Day, readers are invited to see their experience within the drama that is being enacted before their eyes. So where are you in the story? What is your experience? Who are you in the story? What does that look like? There's always, of course, the danger that we are the Pharisees, right? I always am mindful of this since I'm the one who's always wearing a long white robe, right? And walking around and making people shake my hand in the marketplaces and all those sorts of things, right? That's the critique of the Pharisees. And so you have to kind of be mindful of the ways in which you, at least for me, you have to put on this kind of, you have to kind of stop yourself and say, well, now am I acting according to the law or according to the gospel? Which one am I going to be governed by? Am I going to be governed by how I'm going to prove my worth to God? Or am I going to trust that Jesus has already done that work, that he's the one who has restored my sight and my relationship to the true community? And by being in community with Jesus, then I'm in community with the Father. What about you? What do you think?
I would hope I'd be the believer like Blindness, but on the other hand, in certain situations, you question,
Yeah.
And it could be, like my sister was like, she's supposed to with Jesus,
Yeah. Yeah. Jean says she wants to be the believer, the one who says, well, surely this, that was the blind man. I don't know. I think it's somebody else, It's easy to kind of get caught in the question and in the doubting of that. Yep.
But I think because we already are to believe in the Lord, that when we get into that position, we are like the blind man, because look at how he grew in his faith and
Yeah.
in the story, and Jesus keeps us in. He keeps finding us. Yeah, he keeps us.
Yeah, that's the beautiful part of this whole thing. Yep.
And I could think, I didn't think of it earlier, but I was thinking of it now. Is the going and the washing, the anointing? It's a baptism. This man's been baptized.
Yep.
And stuff,
Yep.
He's been baptized. We're his.
Yeah.
And so he's gonna just keep us moving, even though we do this.
Right.
But we're gonna go and be bound.
Yeah, Claire points out that Jesus is always the one who is seeking us out and finding us, right? And that, because of that relationship, then we see ourselves sort of grow in our own confession, right? I think that's what's so beautiful. If you just track the man's confession, it's verse 11, he's just the man, Jesus. Then in verse 17, he's a prophet, right? Similar, maybe greater than Moses. Verse 33, this is the one who has come from God. And then in verse 38, he's in full-fledged confession. Lord, I believe, right? And that is the balance, the thing that tips him over the edge is Jesus finding him. It is only when we are found in Jesus that we can really come to this profound confession of faith. Yeah. Oh, and it's just perfect for the next chapter. Absolutely it is. Yep. Any other comments about chapter 9?
I love this. The ESV version says, I am the man.
Yeah.
I mean, is that how it translates?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh, John,
Yep.
so brilliant.
Yeah, I am the man. Yep.
I mean, just that play on.
Yeah. Which is going to come back then in I am the man comes back in chapter 18 or 19 when Pilate points to Jesus and says, behold the man. Yeah. Yep. He's no longer I am. He's just simply a man who we can abuse as we see fit to fulfill our need. And Jesus willingly submits to the will of the Father to that point. Yep. Well, friends, I have 8 o'clock, so we're doing real great. A reminder that with each one of the books, the book of signs, there's a sign, there's a dialogue, and then Jesus teaches. And the teaching comes in chapter 10, verses 1 to 18. Okay. Deb or Jonathan, would you be willing to read chapter 10, verses 1 to 18? I know it's really long, but it's great to have somebody who's on the recording.
I can.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. Take it away. You're the voice of Jesus now.
Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls out his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father.
Perfect. Well, on the screen, you see all of these famous images of the Good Shepherd. Probably the one that's central is the most famous that you know of. Down
That's
at,
the one we have behind their altar at Mount Hermon.
oh yeah, yep.
Been there forever.
The Good Shepherd was a common image long before the cross in early church history. It was the idea of a shepherd that was the most common way of depicting Jesus. And you see that in the bottom picture, the bottom center picture, that's actually taken from the catacombs in Rome, which dates back to the 1st century, that is there. But of course, this is a pretty famous section of scripture. And in many ways, it sort of stands on its own. You don't really have to parse it out too much, do you? With that being said, if it really is good news, what promises of salvation do you hear in Jesus' teaching in chapter 10? What promises of salvation do you hear in Jesus' teaching in chapter 10? What do you hear?
In chapter 10, it says, I have come so that they may have life and have it in abundance.
Yeah, having life and having it in abundance. That's verse 10, right? Yeah, I have life and have it abundantly.
And 3 times at least he says, I lay down my life.
I lay down my life, that their life, their abundant life, is actually going to be the result of me giving up my life for them. Yeah, oofta, that's really good stuff. Of course, when you're hearing that before the crucifixion, it's sort of confusing. You might not really fully understand it, but here, on this side of the cross and the empty tomb, it really makes a lot of sense. It's funny that he says it 3 times too, because in the Synoptic Gospels, he makes 3 passion predictions. We don't have those same passion predictions in John's Gospel, but yet here he says, I lay down my life. I lay down my life. I lay down my life for the sheep. That's really profound, Gene. Thanks for catching that. They know his voice. Think about that in the context of being blind, right? Even if you're a blind sheep, you can hear the voice of the shepherd. You can follow where he's going. You can hear his stick, his crook dragging on the ground and rustling through the grass. You know where he is, right? Yeah, to know his voice, which is interesting because in John chapter 9, he's blind, right? He receives his sight. That could have been sign faith, but it's not until Jesus comes and finds him and speaks to him a word. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is it? I am, Lord, I believe. And it's in the word, it's in the speech that the blind man comes to faith. They know his voice. Yep, good. Gloria, you're scratching your head like you really got something.
Well, it comes really, like, the shepherd goes after the lost sheep, and you got this lost sheep in chapter 9.
Yeah,
And then you've got the good shepherd passages in chapter 10.
right.
So you've got that.
They fit together, don't they?
I mean, you have the otherwise, I mean, it ties it so well.
Yeah, yep. That chapter 9, you have this sheep that's been cast out of the fold, right? And now Jesus, the good shepherd, comes and gathers him into the pen, right? That he has a place to belong and a place to stay. Yep, good. Anything else?
I know, again, I've not been real good about, chapter, book, verse kind of thing, but this, that Jesus walks ahead. I know that I can't say particularly, but, when I do my devotions, that seems to come out fairly frequently, that he goes before us.
Yeah, I go before you. That's an Old Testament reference back to the Exodus, right, Deb, where the pillar of cloud and fire went ahead of the people. And so here you have a shepherd who's going to get all of his sheep out of the pen. And then once they got him out, he's going to shut the gate so that no wolves can go sleep in the pen while there's no sheep in there. And then, there'd be terrible havoc. So he gets them all out, shuts the gate, and then he runs up ahead so that he can lead them on their way. Yeah, it's a reference to the pillar of cloud and fire. And you're exactly right. It's a shepherding motif, isn't it? Yep.
Well, in verse 16, there are other sheep that are not of this fold, but he brings them along too.
There are other sheep. Yeah, that's why I have a black sheep on our, right? There are other sheep, right? My sister and I have this long running joke, and she calls herself the black sheep of the family. Well, so I love it when I find little black sheep around the necks of Jesus, because then I know my sister's safe too. And she thinks it's funny, of course, but it's kind of our running joke. Jesus doesn't only have white sheep, he's got black sheep too, right? Yep. Yeah, these other sheep that are going to come, who are they? Is this the Gentiles, who are going to come? Are these the Jews who haven't yet confessed their faith in Jesus, but along the way, maybe after the resurrection, they will come to faith in him? Or is it for John? He knows that there are other Christian communities around. Maybe they too, they don't belong to us, but they're still a part, right? It could be this kind of idea of the global or universal church that still belongs to Jesus, right? They all belong, that we might be one under the one shepherd, which we'll hear in chapter 17. Yeah. Gloria.
John wrote Revelation, right?
Correct. Yep.
He was talking to 7 churches.
Right.
So that they would understand understand that they all didn't have to go to St. John's or St. Timothy.
Right, right, yeah. Gloria is saying in Revelation,
Quite a ways apart.
right, yeah, in Revelation chapters 1 to 3, right? John is the one who writes to the 7 churches in the book of Revelation, right? And he's saying, you all belong to the same shepherd. You have the same Lord. Yep. He's Alpha and Omega. He's the beginning and the end. Yep. Yep. That may be another reference, right? Of I have other sheep who are not a part of this fold. Yep. Yep. Yeah, different sheepfold. St. Timothy, Bethlehem UCC, right? Holy Cross, just here in Maple Lake alone, and then there's all sorts all around, right? Any other promises that you grasp here?
I know it's not, but I like that how it goes from a general description to, to then him claiming.
Yeah,
I am the door or gate upon the foundation. I am the good shepherd.
yep,
That,
yep. Yeah, he gives this kind of general description.
His understanding,
Yep,
and then he hones in.
yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah, he delivers the goods, hands over the benefits. Yeah, exactly. Yep. I love the contrasts in this story, right? The sheep are not the gate. I'm not smart enough to get in the gate. I'll tell you that much. But I have Jesus, who is the gate, who gets me into the pen to be safely kept by him, right? Jesus is not the thief and the robber or the bandit who's trying to snatch the sheep from the pen, but he is the good shepherd who knows his own, and his own know me, right? He's not the wolf who comes or the thief who comes to steal and kill and destroy. He is the one who comes to give life and protect and keep me. What a promise that is, these contrasts between the things of this world and who Jesus really is for us. Yep.
And it's not only the promise, gift of Jesus, but a gift of helping us be able to discern.
Yeah, there's a discernment piece to this. Yeah, to be able to not only know the voice, but to know if that really is the true thing. Yeah, this ability to hear, right? And test the spirit, so to speak, to use a Pauline phrase. Yep. Verse 17, I don't know if there's anything to it. I don't know, the context in which Jesus is saying this. And of course, he's Jesus, so he knows everything. But for this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. Right there in verse 17, we've got a hint of what's going to happen. I'm going to die and I'm going to be raised. Wow, what a promise. He's setting the stage, so to speak, right? And he has the authority to do it. Yep. Yeah.
We're not doing verses 19 and 20.
We're not doing 19 and 20. We could. There's
Okay. Again.
the further division. Yeah, if you look at, in some ways, 18 is the discourse. And then it's kind of a surprise because there is another dialogue that happens, right? And verses 19 to 21. I mean, we can read them if we want to talk about them. Yeah, it's funny that they still don't get it, do they? Yeah, yeah, yep, they're just as dense as, rye bread, yep, yep, they just don't get it. You are insane. Why listen to him?
He's a sinner, now he's human.
Yep. Yep. Any other comments about John 10? It is stunningly beautiful. It is just gorgeous. And friends, for those of you who are paying close attention, we are drawing near to the end of the season of Epiphany. And so for those of you who have been around the church for any length of time, you know that the last Sunday in Epiphany is always Transfiguration Sunday. In the Synoptic Gospels, that's when Jesus goes up on the mountain and he is transfigured. His clothes become dazzling white, and these Old Testament characters come and visit him, Moses and Elijah, and they stand on the mountain. And of course, then everybody sees him after this, and they can't stop. They can't help but marvel at this new identity. Well, in some ways, because in John's gospel, he's already so spectacular, he's already dazzling white. We have to come up, and there is no transfiguration scene in John's gospel. On Sunday, the transfiguration is going to be this blind man's receiving his sight and seeing Jesus and coming to faith. And then what happens right on the tail end of, right on the heels of Transfiguration Sunday? Ash Wednesday. And so what's going to be so profound and so fun, I just can hardly contain myself. We'll get done preaching John 9 on Sunday. And then when you come back for Ash Wednesday service, I'm going to mark all of you with the sign of the cross and ash. And then we're going to hear John 10 and this beautiful poetry as the gospel reading for Ash Wednesday. And it's going to set the tone then for the rest of our journey through Lent as we make our way to the cross and hear the end of the book of glory, chapters 12 through 21. And so that's what's ahead for us, friends. It's going to be really great. I'm just going to leave you with these words from Jesus there in John chapter 10. I closed my Bible too quick here, so give me 1 second. This is verses 11 through verses 18. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the authority to lay it down, and I have the authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. Rest in those promises this week, dear sheep. They're good ones, and they'll keep you going, okay? Next week, then, we will tackle, you'll have an opening prayer, and we'll look at John 11, and we're just going to do John 11. Aren't you excited? Little breathing room, so to speak, okay?